this is just to get the discussion going. We already had some discussions about authorship, how important it is, and I just remember that yeah, Dwayne and Daniel had some personal experience and suggestions for going forward. So I'm going to talk a little bit, and then we can have a general discussion about this. So authorship. There are two main questions when determining authorship. There's, first of all, who becomes an author, and also the order of authorship in the paper. And wherever you're going to look your sources about to discuss it, the first thing that comes up is it's very important to make the decisions about authorships before the writing process starts. So we are in very, very good shape at this point. So listing the authors tells the readers who did the work and should ensure that the right people get the credit and take responsibility for the research. And so today, kind of the goal is, I don't think we're going to solve everything about what we're going to do, but at least start the discussion. And so talk about what are the criteria or potential criteria in PermafrostNet Theme 1 to become an author, and discuss how we should go about the order of authorship in future publications. Because in some instances, publications, as you all know, take very long time to get out. And so for some students who will graduate before a paper is published, it's important that those criteria are in place so that they get the credit for the work they've done during their graduate studies, even though they have graduated after. And so first question, who is an author? And I use here the criteria by the International Committee on Medical Journal Editors. It's one that comes out on many sources, on many papers about authorship. So I just listed those, but we could come up with our own criteria. Again, it's just to get us started with the discussion started, and you have 4 main criteria. So substantial contribution to the conception or design of the work, or the acquisition, analysis, or interpretation of data for the work, and drafting the work or revising it critically for important intellectual content, and final approval of the version to be published, and agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work in ensuring that questions related to the accuracy or integrity of any part of the work are appropriately investigated and resolved. And it's important to note that you have to meet, according to their definition, to meet all 4 criteria to be an author. And all people who do meet those criteria should be authors and not left out of the paper, because they have what we call a substantial contribution to the paper. Here I just listed a couple of terms we often see or hear about authorship. So acknowledgements. So acknowledgements could be people that only meet 2 or 3 of the 4 criteria I mentioned before. So in which case they will fall in the category of being acknowledged in the paper rather than being a formal author on the paper. And again, it could be based on the criteria we have in PermafrostNet Theme 1. And so we could have specific criteria that lead to being acknowledged rather than being an author on the paper. Ghost authors, it could mean 2 things I saw online, but maybe it doesn't apply as much to us. But so it could be in instances where people write the paper and they are not acknowledged properly on the paper, or it could be people who have a significant contribution to research project but are not listed as authors. And the examples we see often is specifically for students who are part of the work along the entire way. Maybe they graduate and then the paper is finally written after, and they don't get the credit they deserve for the work they've done. So it's really important to keep track. Of gift authors, we often see that this often happens with senior researchers that are just added to the paper, or maybe researchers who have agreements with partners, collaborators, and should they just exchange authorship to boost their publication record. And this is, well, basically unethical, because those researchers did not do a substantial contribution to the paper, and this practice should not be used when doing publications. Now I move on to the order of authors. Again, I'm just going to go through a couple of key points about the order, and then we're going to discuss it more after. So the order should be decided collectively by the author group. So there should be criteria in place before we start writing again, so that collectively we feel comfortable with the order we have at the end. And there are notable implications regarding the author order, specifically for the first author, because the first author is a coveted position because of its increased visibility. So it's, as we all know, the first author is always the name the readers will all see in publications. You get more, when you have evaluations for your performance, being a first author is always regarded as being better, even if you have a note saying that the order of authorship was based on an alphabetical order, or you all equally first authors. It still remains that when people see a first author, they assume that you've done the largest contribution to the paper. So this, even though we can have an equal contribution to a paper, being the first one has big implication. The last author position is traditionally reserved for the supervisor or principal investigator. Again, this really depends on the field. In my experience, it doesn't always work like that. I just put it just as a main point to remember for the order of authors. And given that there's no uniform rule about the author order, readers may find it difficult to assess the nature of the author's contribution to a research project. And this is interesting because more and more, many papers will have a section where the authors will list the contribution of every author in the paper, so that people can see what is the actual contribution of each individual author for the publication of the paper. And there exists many ways of establishing an author order list. You can go by relative contribution, where basically the person who made the most substantial contribution to the work will be the first author, and so on for as we go in the author list. But this can be difficult to assess in some situation and can lead to conflict if people don't feel they get the credit for the work they've done. So you could go in alphabetical list if you feel that you have a large group and everyone's work is approximately equal. But again, there are some flaws with this. Multiple first authors, as I mentioned earlier. So even if you say we have a equal contribution to the paper and we should all be first authors, and even if you put a note on the paper, it remains that readers will always read the first person's name on the list and assume that this person has done the biggest contribution. So it's still not as equal as it should be. And there even exists some point system. This is just an example here by this publication, where depending on what you did, you get a certain amount of point. And then at the end, if you have enough point, you get to be an author, and your score gives you your rank in the list of author. And if you don't get enough point, then you become an you go into the acknowledgements. And finally, contribution of authors. I want to go back to this because there exists some formalized ways to describe the contribution of each author. One of the more well-known is the contributor roles taxonomy, the credit statement you often see in the papers. I've personally used it a couple of times, and I find it very interesting. So here you have this list of the diverse roles you can use in the publication of the paper. And so multiple people can have the same contribution. They have different contributions, and if, for example, everyone has a same contribution regarding methodology or conceptualization, you can even put into the description someone was lead and then another person was supporting, or they all equal. So you can go with varying degrees as well in your description of the contribution. And then with this, the credit statement, you will add the ORCID number of the person, so that really your name is linked to a unique identifier. And so we can link the exact contribution you did to your person specifically. And then we could, in theory, go look at all your publications with your ORCID number and make sure that we have the right person and see that your specific contribution. So even though you will be, for example, a second author or a third author, you could still be involved in conceptualization, validation, things that small differences between first and second author that would still be that could be recognized as very valuable for your personal record. And so going back to our initial goal to talk about what are the criteria for PermafrostNet Theme 1 to become an author and discuss how we would go about the order of authorship. So I wanted to start discussing, I'm seeing the time now, so start discussing today about who should be an author in the publications and how we go about determining this. What should be the order of authorship, and should we have a formalized way of designating this list? And so again, we should discuss, so we should have this discussion started now, but every time a paper or project is started within theme 1 or over the next few months, years, this discussion should always be, should be had again in order to make sure there are no conflicts going forward. And we also, I wrote this here because we had someone mentioned it in one of their previous discussions that we should always, make some kind of a call to everyone involved in Permafrost Theme 1 to make sure we reach out to every people that might have been involved and that we forgot about before we start a paper or submit a paper in the end. So make sure that everyone gets the credit they deserve. That's it.